got a very unhealthy relationship with money. We don't understand that money has got no personality, that it's fluid, right? That it moves around, that money's job is to transfer and move around. But we've got a very unhealthy relationship with money as a people, psychologically speaking, and that's why many of us are in trouble.
I think we also tie too much to the outcome that money can bring. You know, money can buy you those new shoes or that nice car, or that nice house. And it's that output emotional attachment that causes us to sometimes make the wrong decisions.
Sure. So when it comes to being able to manage our money and the financial literacy that is associated with it, men would go, but where would you learn this stuff? You know, I mean, especially in the 20s, I mean, I can imagine a 20-year-old saying, the only way I get financial literacy is by making the bad decisions and then paying the price for the bad decisions so that I know in my 30s I don't make the bad decisions anymore.
Correct. So that's something that I'm working on in the background. I'm just waiting for final feedback, and then I'll come back to you guys with that, most definitely. But that's not the way it should be. We shouldn't be learning our lessons through our mistakes. If you make mistakes for, let's say, 10 years between the age of 20 to 30, that means you've lost 10 years worth of earning capacity, worth of creation, worth of going forward. So there needs to be something. There needs to be something. We don't learn it in our BComs. We don't learn it in our BAs. We don't learn it in MBAs, how to manage money on a personal financial space. We don't learn it. If you speak to massive CAs, they'll speak to, we never learned this. We don't understand how these things work. It's become Greek in day-to-day society in South Africa, and I believe Africa as well.
So what should our perspective of money be? How should we be looking at money?
So money shouldn't have any connotation to you on an emotional aspect. It shouldn't affect you psychologically in any way. If you ask anybody, and you'll see the eyes light up, if I give you 5 million rand right now, immediately you start thinking of what you can do with that 5 million rand. And we should kind of like train ourselves to think that, you know, this is this, what can I do to go forward, instead of what can I get out of it at the end of the day. I mean, if you sit with your financial planner, if he or she is doing the right thing, you'll know that, hey, I'm back, I'm behind, I need to focus on this. But had you known what you know then, 10, 20, 30 years ago, life would be a different story.
So in other words, should we be looking at money, right? So going back to the 5 million rand illustration, should I be looking at money in a way of saying, how do I make this money make more money for me?
Correct.
As opposed to, how can I spend this money? It should be, how do I make money from the money that I have?
100%. Two very, very good books that have shaped the way that I think about money and see money. Richest Man in Babylon, quite an old book.
Yeah, Richest Man in Babylon, yeah.
Very, very good book. It's got good financial principles that one can incorporate. And then the second one is the book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, I read that one.
It's just phenomenal. You know, when you can get to that level of thinking about money, you're set to go. You have to think like a millionaire before you can become one, because creating wealth and maintaining wealth are two very different things.
Yes, there's a lot for the creation of wealth, but then there are TV shows like I Blew It, which show you around the sustainability of that wealth.
Correct. You see it with the stats of the winners of the lotteries. They run out of it. Majority of them, more than 90%, are done by year 7.
Yeah. So we're talking money management, 0861987000. What should I know in my 20s, in my basic financial, not basic, but when I'm 20 years old, or between 20 and 29, what must I know about money?
Number one, learn how to budget, and learn how to budget like a machine, because that's something you're going to carry on throughout your career, right? If you've got your budget down, knowing what's coming in and what's going out, and you've got control over that, you're good to go. In an ideal world, if it was all fairy tales and roses, try and live on a 70-30 split. 70%, you live off of that. That's your salary you pay yourself. The 30% is you're putting away to make more money. Between emergency funding, retirement planning, business ventures, that's money that you can play with.
So would you recommend somebody in their 20s to start opening up a business, or to start thinking more entrepreneurially to find a way of making more money?
Not necessarily. I meet people who are part of the corporate structure, private sector, who are highly successful at that, but their money management skills are sound. So it's not to say that you being a business owner or not, you'll be more successful. The opportunity is higher because the more you work or the harder you work, and the return on investment can be greater. But it's not necessarily a determining factor. It's more about how you first work with that money.
Got you. So when we're speaking about budgeting, a lot of kids that are like 20s will say, but hold on, I'm still in school. The only thing that I've got right now is NFSAS, right? So how would we even make that work?
So that's where we go back to the educational aspect, is where there has to be something in place, is to teach these principles before we go in. You don't want to go first, make the mistake, and then have to learn. So if you can get any exposure to that, by all means. But even if you're getting a small salary or an allowance from NSFAS as an example, how are you working with that? At the end of the day, we shouldn't be looking at our budget that from the first day of the month, 5's coming in, and by day 31, it should be depleted to 0. That's not the mentality we should have when we look at our budget.
How much must I have left over in the month?
It depends on what structure you want to follow, right? So if we're looking at a 70-30 split, you should be working on 70. That should cover all of your daily living, right? The other 30%, how you work with that is your choice. So for example, if you're putting a certain amount away into an emergency fund, a certain amount into retirement funding, your check account can show 0 at the end of the month. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because your 30% you've extracted out of your bank account.
And it's chosen as savings.
Correct, in certain other avenues. So it depends on what you want to do and how you want to achieve it. I personally believe that a bank account is just for transacting. I don't save in the bank.
What?
Yeah.
A bank account is just, and that's the thing, it's about looking at money in a non-emotional way. A bank account should be for transacting, and you should be looking at other avenues of saving.
Correct.
When I bought a house, my banker said to me, Faith, when you overpay on your house, you gain much more interest than, for example, when you've got a savings account. So the interest you generate on overpaying on your bond, and therefore you can withdraw from that, would be much more and will yield much more, as opposed to just investing in a interest-bearing account.
In terms of the savings on the interest.
Yeah.
So that's one of the balances one should also focus on in your 20s, is if we look at the debt that we make, especially when we're young, we make silly mistakes. And there's lots of variables on why we make these mistakes. I mean, it's the social media pressure, it's the friends, it's trying to fit in, and all of those variables. But one shouldn't be focusing on just too much of investing and trying to grow your wealth, but you're still sitting with debt. Because the market never gives you, or on rare occasions, will give you more interest than what you're paying interest. So one needs to strike that balance of lowering debt and then also investing. But we're working against time here. So for example, retirement, you're always on the back foot with retirement. From the moment you get your first salary, you're on the back foot. You need to start saving and catching up. And one needs to then find that equilibrium where we then paying off our debt, but also saving towards retirement.
Sure. And then when it comes to our 30s now, what must I be looking at the age of 30? What must I know? So budgeting, it should be my cornerstone at the age of 20.
Yeah.
By the time I hit 30, what must I do?
So before I answer that, the more you can learn in your 20s and the more you can implement and get right, the lesser of strain you're going to carry as you get older. In your 30s, you're becoming established, right? You steady down with your work. You've become established in who you are, what you know, and what you bring to the table. And a direct result of that is that your income should start increasing. And when you're in your 30s, keep focusing on keeping your life standard pretty normal. The biggest thing we do as South Africans is once the paycheck increases, so does our life standard. And then we're living beyond our means. FNB done a study quite some time ago. I think it's over 100% of people are living off of debt to cover day-to-day needs. So one needs to focus on making sure that your life standard is not stretched to its max. Principle, budgeting, making sure that that's all in place. Re-looking your policies, life cover, medical aid, those kind of things. Looking what you just need so that you're not spending unnecessarily. And then you need to make sure that you're saving for retirement and that money is growing.
Yeah, but then how then do you start balancing, Ashley, between being stable and saving versus being ambitious and having goals? Because a lot of the entrepreneurs that we see, the buildings that we're in, the multimillionaires that we see, they used people's money to make money.
Yeah.
The non-emotional aspect of money.
Correct.
So other people's money was used to generate money for them. And that went into, that then is where the debt would then come from.
Yeah.
not necessarily because they lived outside of their means, but simply because they were ambitious enough to try and take risks.
Correct.
As opposed to just being more conservative with money.
Yeah.
So where do you strike that balance between being ambitious and having goals and wanting to conquer the world, which I think every young person should, has got those goals, versus the stability that comes with saving and saving for a rainy day and retirement and the like?
So there's a saying that says you don't tread the water with both feet. So you don't test the depths of the water with both your feet.
Got you.
So you understand that when you look at an entrepreneur, one thing that they know well is they understand risk versus reward. So you want to approach everything with maximum amounts of reward, but with minimal risk. And you don't want to, for example, I'll give you a silly example, withdrawing your pension if you got retrenched at the age of 50 to start a business. That's a very high risk and probability of a low reward, because now you're taking your future salary that you're supposed to live off of, throwing it into a business, and that business has to yield you two things: day-to-day living, plus it has to sort out your pension that you've now taken away. You have to catch up double. So when you look at that, you need to understand risk versus reward. You need to do your costing to understand that, hey, I can make this decision, and even if it goes sour, it's not the end of the world. I can start another one.
So then, for those that would be, more entrepreneurial and want to take the risks, is there an age, for example, from a financial planning perspective, is there an age that one should ideally start a business? They say fail fast and fail forward,
Correct.
right? But fail fast and fail forward at the age of 80 may not give you so much forward to go into, right? Just being crass about it.
Yeah.
You might not have a lot of forward left.
Yeah.
So when it comes to failing fast and failing forward, what age should I be looking at if I want to make those high risk, high reward decisions?
There's absolutely no age. I agree with you 100%. Make as many mistakes as you can. Keep doing it, and don't be scared to make those mistakes. But just do that risk versus reward and understand how to do that, so that when you make mistakes, you're not down and out. You can stand up again and say, okay, cool. I think there was some other stat with regards to the millionaires of the 7 streams of income.
Gotcha.
And they said that you have to start like 63 businesses, considering the failure rate, in order for you to have a steady, sustainable 7. So fail as many times as you want. Fail as many times as you can. In sales, we call it every no leads you to the next yes. And that's like that in life. The more you fail, the more you learn, and the quicker you do it. Just make sure that you do it and you don't wipe yourself out at the end of the day.
And how do we then present? So for example, those that are taking the high risks, right, in their 30s, what must be stashed, for the rainy day? What does a stash for a rainy day so that I can recover look like?
So that depends obviously from industry to industry, but just a safety net is always 6 months. If you can have 6 months overheads, and when we talk of an entrepreneur, we forget 2 things. We're talking about 2 entities. If you're an entrepreneur, you're an employee of that business. So you need your emergency fund, because if your business can't pay you. But then your business also needs a rainy day fund if it can't pay its staff. So we're talking about 2 separate entities here that need to be planned for, because one can falter and the other one can stay afloat, and vice versa, or both can be wiped out because of bad planning.
You're saying I must have a 6-month salary in place?
Ideally, in an ideal world, minimum.
Ashley.
Look, we're talking
Ashley,
some Shrek fairy tales.
We got COVID that we need to worry about. We got people here that are still trying to make it through the first paycheck. Now you're saying 6 months, but the truth of the matter is, and I've heard this before, that a 6-month salary allows you to have the cushioning that you need should anything go wrong.
Absolutely.
That you've got 6 months that you can recover, which means that we need a whole lot of wealthy people and a whole lot of rich people in our society. Because if you could have 6 months salary, that means if a person is earning, let's say 50,000 Rand a month, right? They must have 50,000 Rand times 6 stashed up somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, Ashley, that's fine. No. I think I like that. Let's say 50,000 Rand. I just want you all to know that I did maths standard grade. So I don't know what's 50 times 6. What's 5 times 6, everybody? 30.
Yeah.
30. Yeah. Oh, thank God. Because it would have been embarrassing. So I need about 300,000 Rand that is saved up, stashed somewhere.
Yeah.
My question then to you would be, how do I make 300,000 Rand now? So if we're saying I make 50, I need to have 300,000 stretched up somewhere. How do I make it? How do I make 300,000 Rand? Is it through investment policies? Is it through, what must I do to make 300,000 Rand?
So let's go back to the initial. When you start working and you got this knowledge of how to start, you probably started on a salary of 5,000, 6,000, let's call it. And you've progressively kept on saving throughout the years. You had this knowledge and you just started doing it. By the time you get to the 50, you've probably got that and more saved up maybe then in other vehicles. So that then becomes the solution, is that the earlier we can learn it, the earlier we understand how to do this, which in the long run, we won't then bite our shoes off saying, shucks, I wish I knew earlier.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one question. When there's not financial pressure, right, and you can answer it if you want, if there's not financial pressure, how does our decision-making change? Changes tremendously.
Absolutely.
Because when there's financial pressure, we make decisions out of desperation. When there's no financial pressure, then we make decisions out of growth and wealth creation.
Ooh, that should be like a thing that needs a... What are you saying?
So when we
to
got
me?
that right...
You need to repeat that. No, my brain needs to... What did you just say? Ooh, English. Did you hear English being spoken? Ooh. Okay, yes.
All right.
When we are not under financial pressure. Yeah.
Okay, so when we're not under financial pressure, we make decisions for going forward, for wealth creation. But when there's financial pressure and stress, we make decisions out of desperation, because then we need to eat at the end of the month. So yes, we're all going to go through that struggle. All of us that are ambitious, all of us that want to build something, that want to leave a legacy, that want to create something, you have to go through those teething phases. But watch your psychology during those teething phases. Don't necessarily make decisions out of desperation.
Abraham Kitty saying, a 40-year-old with a salary of 25,000 Rand a month, how much can one save for retirement? So let's move on from the 30s now. Let's take it to the 40s.
To the 40s, right. To answer that question, there's no specific limit to which you want to save. But that goes back again to initially your budget. What do you need every month to live? If you're taking home 25 and you need 24 to live, that means you've got 1,000 Rands disposable income. But ideally, you'd want to be in the 70-30 split where you have 30%. But now if you're only starting at the age of 14, you haven't been saving since younger, you might need to be saving more to reach your goal, but your budget doesn't necessarily allow it.
So let's say that people are, and right now, I think many people are going through a time where they've had to start from scratch.
Yeah.
Because COVID has really impacted jobs significantly. So there's been a significant jobs bloodbath in the country that many have experienced. Industries and sectors of industry have let people off at an exponential amount. So many people are starting from scratch. When they start from scratch and they are 40 or they're 36 or they're 37 or they're 48 for that matter, the retirement age is already decades back.
Yeah.
So what does a person in that situation then do? Because now they've been impacted by COVID, they have to start all over again. So the savings goes completely out of the window.
Correct. So, I mean, in such a case, which is really, it's a travesty, it's a big problem. I mean, in this country, we see it every day now. But one there needs to... I believe in transparency with the clients that I deal with, is to say, look, you're 40 now, this is the goal that you want to achieve. The likelihood of you achieving this is next to none, but I can show you what you are projecting. And that kind of soothes, or I wouldn't say soothes, but it gives you that more closures to say, okay, now I know what I'm in for. You don't want to be going into this blindly and thinking, okay, if I save 500 Rand for the rest of my career, I'll retire successfully. There has to be analysis, there has to be projections, inflation needs to be considered, post-retirement, all of these complexities and these variables, and one that needs to understand exactly what you're in for at the end of the day.
In my 40s, what must I know?
Okay. You need to start looking at your calculations of debt repayments, especially on a house. You need to make sure that when you want to retire, because remember, Pension Funds Act in South Africa says you can retire at the age of 55 onwards. Depending on when you want to retire, and if your calculations and everything are done correctly, you don't want to be paying off debt still in retirement, because it's going to make you need unnecessary money to pay off a bond, pay off a vehicle, and so forth.
Yeah, you're going to be working until you're 70 because you're trying to pay off a bond.
Correct.
So is that why that it's not advisable to buy a home at the age of like 50
Correct.
or 60, because you're close to retirement, that the better age to buy a house will be in your 20s and your 30s, so that by the time you are like 50, you're really at least over the halfway mark in paying off your house.
Yeah. 100%. Well, it depends on how much you earn. I mean, you can go buy a house at 50 if you're earning 300,000 Rand a month and living off of 30, because you can pay it off in 4, 5, 6 years.
Got you.
But us general South Africans, unfortunately, don't all earn that much. You know, so we have to do those calculations. We need to know what we're in for.
50 plus.
50 plus. You need to make sure throughout everything, you need to make sure that you've invested and where you're going, that it's growing. You need to be doing this from the get-go, but this is when it becomes crucial. Making sure that you make the right investment decisions and that everything is taken care of. Looking at things like your will and testament, making sure that's structured correctly, that God forbid anything happens, you're fine. And then your debt should be close to paid off, if not paid off already, in an ideal world. And those last few years is where you're really capitalizing on saving a ton of money to make sure that you're ready for investment, maybe even downsizing a little bit. You were staying in a 5-bedroom house, you had kids in the house, they left. You can sell the house, buy something smaller, and you're sitting with a chunk of capital that you can also push in somewhere else.
So you should be ideally debt-free by what age?
Ideally, if we could all,
when the world was flat, when the world was flat, ideally.
You know, if we could buy a house at 25, all of us, you'd be paid that house off already by 45. That would be great. But it also depends on your circumstances. I think the ideal goal is that you are debt-free before you retire. That's the ideal. Whether it be 55, 60, 65, you just want to be debt-free. That's the biggest thing.
We're certainly going into the money matters this afternoon. Dear Africa saying, when there's no financial pressure, we make decisions for growth. But when there's financial pressure, we make decisions out of desperation. I know that is like the power thing to say. That is the power line forever. Can I squeeze it? I think I'm going to be in trouble if I squeeze in a call. But we do thank you so much. Ashley, it's always been a learning experience for when it comes to speaking to you. I love this. How would you spend your money if the pressure was not on you? And when you were not desperate? When you were desperate, when you are under financial pressure, you make decisions from desperation. But when you're not under financial pressure, you make decisions for growth and wealth. Love it. Ashley